Module 16 is to do with the role of the therapist. Because what it is that we believe is actually really, really important, right? And and we can also be a big influencer, right? So paying attention to yourself as to what it is that your belief system is, as opposed to imposing it upon somebody else, is actually really important.
Self-awareness.
Exactly, yeah. And so here's a list of questions in regards to asking yourself, for your own self-assessment, in essence, right?
So I have a question. One may think that, does a therapist to use spiritually integrated psychotherapy, does the therapist need to have a faith? What do you think?
I don't think so necessarily. I think it's more just being open and accepting of where that client is and being willing to explore and recognize there will be differences between what you may believe or not believe and what the client does. So
that's right, with the openness and curiosity.
Curiosity is a great word.
Yeah. So it's always good to ask questions because there's so many different religions and spiritual beliefs. It's good to get their understanding of it and how it impacts their life, because it can always be used in counseling for part of their tools or whatever, or strategies, whatever that is, for understanding. So it is about that curiosity and the openness. Being non-judgmental is huge too.
That's right.
Exactly. We can't have experienced everything.
No.
Right? I mean, and that's the bottom line of it. So even like in addictions counseling, there are those that have been addicted, right, who want to help others because they've had that experience, and then there's those that have learned about addiction and want to help others who have experienced that experience, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an addict in order to be a counselor, and sometimes that can be detrimental, right?
Yeah, everyone has their own belief. Sometimes people do want to match belief systems, and that's okay. We have to respect that. And sometimes it doesn't matter to them.
That's right.
And also we cannot know all religious teachings, right? We cannot follow them, but we can learn from the client what they think, what are their values.
And that's true in regards to religious teachings, right? Because a lot of what's happening today is an amalgamation of different religious teachings, right? So it's not actually really a structured spirituality, right? Because it can actually really be, I believe in Jesus and I believe in reincarnation.
Exactly,
Yes.
I have a client like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's how it works for her or him.
That's right. Yeah. And then just being able to go with that.
Yeah.
Right?
So we said we can learn by asking questions, right? So what are the most effective questions then? So I'm thinking, for example, what do you think about God? What is God like for you?
Just that determination of whether spirituality is at all important to that person, and if it isn't, then you know to move on, and if it is, then explore it more. And
Yeah.
I think we have to know our own bias or beliefs about religion ourselves, because we could project it onto somebody.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful of that.
Assumptions.
Just make sure that we understand our own belief system as well as listen to theirs.
And there is a pitfall for that stereotype of a certain kind of religion, right? If we see somebody like with visible symbols or practices of that kind of religion, we may assume like, oh, this person is then must be this, must be that. So it may turn out opposite, just the opposite. So we need to be careful about our assumptions, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Well, just asking, do you have a belief system, right? So it even, using the word belief system takes it away from spirituality, away from religiosity, right? So, and a belief system can be
Yeah.
this too will pass. Right? And being aware of spiritual resources or practices is really important as well. And sometimes people are actually really not in touch with those spiritual practices. So even to be able to suggest some spiritual practices, like for example prayer, right, can be helpful.
That's right.
And I think part of we're talking about the role of the therapist here, and cultural competency is a huge skill that we're encouraged as students for sure, and ongoing to just be open to and seek to or strive to develop in your life as a counselor. And so just recognizing that we need to have that self-awareness of our own values, like you were saying, Christy, and just not enforcing those on others, but recognizing that there will be differences and accepting those differences. I think acceptance is a huge part of it. So.
And like I said before, even in the same religion, everybody can understand in a different way, right? But some people may understand that from grace, some people understand from wrath of God.
That's right.
It can be motivation for them to continue their lives, maybe different for each other.
Really, the client has the knowledge to share with you. You get it from them firsthand because there's so many facets of it. And then how we even have to pay attention as we're learning the information, how is that affecting us? We almost have to pay attention to our own body signals too. Because sometimes we may be giving off something we may not be aware of as well. And that's what we especially learn when we're in school, as you guys have been learning. We need to pay more attention to ourselves too, and how we're responding to the client. Because that can impact the relationship with them.
Yeah, be careful about transference and counter-transference.
Yes.
Yeah, self-reflection is actually really, really important, right? So that you have a process that you go through in order to be able to, in essence, figure out what's happening for you with the transference and counter-transference, right? And there's a number of different tools and techniques that we're going to be talking about to do with that. One of which is actually really creating your own self-portrait. And paying attention to exactly what it is that's happening with your body, right? Whether it's actually really in session to do a transference or it's out of session to do with your life, right? Because all of which can impact what's happening for you within the session. All right, so there's 9 steps in regards to being a helping professional. Helping professional can be anyone, right? Helping others. So number 1, help clients share their stories and experiences and acknowledge they can be difficult and challenging to share. Yes. Number 2, help them find starting points in their concerns by identifying signs of hope and working with them to clarify problems from their viewpoint.
We get a lot of times say, I don't know where to start.
Exactly.
One of the common things I hear.
Definitely. Number 3, assisting them in overcoming blind spots, reconceptualize concerns, and developing new perspectives. Number 4, explore hopeful alternatives to their issue. 5, helping clients to understand what is possible and what is not. 6, assist them in making choices and committing to those choices.
It's a challenge.
It is very much a challenge.
Number 7, brainstorm options and strategies with them to reach their goals. Number 8, assisting them to turn strategies into meaningful plans. And number 9, providing support and also challenge them as needed so they can reach their goals. Yeah.
So it really sounds like a collaborative effort.
Collaborative.
Just each of these is helping, not doing for the client, but just bringing it out of the client and coming alongside them.
Yeah, you are the support, but you also have to help them be realistic.
Yes.
Because sometimes we get goals that are quite lofty and are not possible.
Right.
So just kind of really
And reminding.
Yeah.
So that was the statement blind spot. So we can see it where the blind spot of the client, but they can't see because they are so much into their negative thoughts. Especially it's important for the issue of forgiveness and letting it go. So there are clients that the person has thoughts about the past and they can't forget and they can't forgive. it needs a little bit forgiveness, a little bit, so we can remind them, what is forgiveness for you in your faith, in your values.
And it's always good to tell clients that counseling can be very uncomfortable. Especially when it comes time to challenge them, they don't, or give your interpretations, they don't always like it. So it's always good to know that you're there to support them, but it may be uncomfortable. It's a good acknowledgement throughout the sessions.
Yeah, spiritual and personal development. So, how can we maintain spiritual well-being? This can be good for psychotherapists too. We can talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really good as therapists that whatever it is that we are encouraging clients to do, we actually really do ourselves.
We need to apply it first ourselves.
Exactly,
To be able to
exactly.
helpful for the clients.
Mhm.
And okay, let's continue then. But it's important for me. So I believe in preventive medicine instead of rather than curing. Yes, cure is important, but prevention is more important. Comes first. So if we do some preventive activities for ourselves, we can be able to. We can be helpful for the clients. So we can do something to maintain our spiritual and personal development, spiritual well-being. What are the steps for that? So we need to engage in ongoing spiritual reflection. There may be burnout, like there may be some moments that we are frustrated, we feel exhausted, so we stop and think and reflect on our spiritual well-being, nurturing and to utilize our own spiritual resources, right? And we can take care. We need to take care of ourselves to be able to be helpful for others. So there is a saying that we are not human beings experiencing spirituality, but we are spiritual well-beings experiencing humanity, human experiencing.
Yes, we're each a gift from God.
Yeah.
Well, I think anyone in a helping role forgets to take care of themselves a lot.
Mhm.
Any sort of helper, does not matter whether it's our job or other jobs. If you're helping people, we all kind of forget about our own needs and our own well-being. And that causes that burnout.
Exactly. And it is actually really good to get support, right? And supervision is a way to do so, right? But also in between supervision, we're actually really in charge of our own supervision. We self-supervise, right? So it is actually really very important to have a routine, right? So that you are taking care of yourself and you're following your own rules, right? Your own guidelines. And it is important to reconnect with intention, right? You know, to be able to remind yourself, why am I here?
Why did I choose this path?
Exactly.
Like how many times we really question your ability? You're like, am I doing the right thing? Is this helpful?
Exactly.
It's hard not to get caught in our own thoughts even.
It's very, very easy when things are going well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then
Yes.
it's when it is that there's that difficulty, right? That disconnection, whatever it is that might be about, right? It really is important to be able to get in touch with the fact that you do have purpose, right? You do have knowledge, right? So, as well as, you know, continuing education is also really important as well, just to be able to recognize, I might be limited in this area, right? Witnessing is actually really important as well, right? Because sometimes what's happening when clients come in, they're not actually really wanting to solve something, they're just really wanting a witness, right? Someone to talk it through with, right? With compassion.
Yeah.
Right. So there's 4 different models in regards to ethics. And so the one I chose for this topic of conversation was to do with virtue ethics. The idea is that as counselors, we're actually really virtuous, right? So when it is that we look at difficult situations, we're actually really connecting those difficult situations with the virtues. Virtue examples, right? Honesty, morally good, generosity, compassion, courage, fidelity, integrity, fairness, self-control, right? So what we're looking at is actually really going through a process, a model in regards to how it is that we figure out an ethical situation, an ethical dilemma.
And these are universal truths and universal values that everybody can agree on, right?
So there's 4 questions that go along with virtue ethics. All right. Does somebody have an ethical dilemma that they've come across?
So I had this client who came in, and just out of, I guess, gratitude for the work we've been doing together and such, wanted to give me a gift. So ethically speaking, I wasn't comfortable with that. So how do you deal with that? And
Exactly. So based upon the virtues, right? So when you think about it, so here's the first question. What emotions and intuition were you aware of as you considered the ethical dilemma, and what were they telling you to do?
I guess there was discomfort with the fact that I understood their appreciation, and being someone who likes to give gifts myself, I could understand where they were coming from, but I felt that was crossing a bit of a line, that they did not need to do that. So it was a hard place. Like, how do you gently explain that to someone? But I was a little uncomfortable, to be honest.
Well, that's interesting, right? So their virtue was probably to do with generosity, right? And your virtue, what you're talking about, is how do I say what I need to say compassionately, right? Maintain self-control. And you're questioning, is it a morally good to accept the gift, right? So the next question, how can my values best show caring for the client in this situation?
I guess be grateful and accept the fact that they were that kind and thoughtful, understanding their nature to be generous, but then maybe in a very kind and compassionate way to explain, ethically, I don't feel comfortable in accepting that gift, so I think that's how I would handle that.
Sounds good. How will my decision affect other relevant individuals in this ethical dilemma?
Well, there's a cultural part of it,
Yeah.
because there are some cultures where
They're
it's
very-
seen again as
If you
disrespectful if you reject the gift.
Right, yeah, so I never did resolve that. What if you've had a planned offer, I know this is Greenfield, sorry, and like, what do you do in that situation? Yeah, I'm just learning how to, I've never been offered a gift yet.
I think you also have to look at the culture, right?
Yeah, so.
Because I think they discuss it in school. With the different cultures, you need to be aware. I think going into it, learn about the background of that culture. Is that something that is done, and how would it be interpreted in that culture to reject the gift? Because then we have to look at it that way too, which of course makes it more complicated.
That's
when
right.
we're looking at this situation.
So again, it's knowing your client, knowing where they're coming from with that offer of a gift, and so it's not, there is a fine line, I guess. There isn't a solid line saying, no, you should never accept a gift from a client because of their cultural values, beliefs, and you don't want to offend them. But then how does that play out with other clients too? It's just hard. Like, would you do it on a client-by-client basis, or?
Well, generally the way in which I do it is I say that, you're accepting the gift on behalf of the office.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Right?
that's
So the
nice.
plant stays at the office,
Yeah.
the card stays on the bulletin board,
Right.
the box of chocolate is left in the waiting room,
Mhm.
whatever it is that might be.
Okay.
Yeah, so then you can kind of avoid that offending the client aspect,
Mm-hmm.
but then it doesn't make it your individual.
That's right.
That
Yeah.
sounds.
So next is, what decision would I feel best about publicizing?
There's another hard
It is.
What do you think?
It is also another ethical issue.
Yeah, so really, when it is that you have it based upon the office, then, that's well worth publicizing,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And, we've even had people call into the radio station when it is that they're, whatever it is playing this channel of radio, right? That actually call in to say, the counseling house has this channel of radio on. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And the last question, so number 5, what decision would best define who I am as a person?
I think personally for me, it would be a desire not to offend, not to harm that client by refusing something that they graciously gave. So I think again, your way of doing it in a diplomatic way is just to say, well, thank you, I'll accept this on behalf of the counseling house. I would feel comfortable with that. So.
That's good. Yeah.
It does ease that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
If you say you're accepting as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
it really, I think, would eliminate a lot of discomfort.
Right.
Because you tend to go, oh, and you don't really know what to respond, like you're kind of taken aback,
That's right.
especially with ethical dilemmas.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can get it secretly and just remain silent. No, I'm kidding. We can.
Wait a minute, what virtue was that?
Personal expression. No, we can use professional identity, and we can talk about boundaries.
That's
We can
true.
say like professionally, we are not allowed to do that. So if you work, for example, in institutional place, this is a available reason to explain to the client.
Oh yeah, definitely. So working through the work of Krista Neff, well, what is self-compassion? Self-compassion is a practice in which we learn to be a good friend to ourselves, to become an inner ally. And there's 3 elements to self-compassion as well. The first one is to do with self-kindness, which is really caring towards ourselves. It's also to do with common humanity, meaning that there's a sense of interconnectedness, because the truth of the matter is we're all human and we all make mistakes. So mindfulness is about being aware of the moment-to-moment experiences in a clear and balanced manner. So relating to our work and our changing landscape of who it is that we are, with kindness and acceptance and acknowledgement that we are all imperfect. And of course, one of the themes that we found in regards to when it is that I did my doctoral dissertation was that to do with actual self-acceptance. The truth of the matter is that in the end of the process, that it actually really allowed the practitioners to get in touch with who it is that they truly were, to be able to accept themselves in order to be able to, in essence, move on and gain a sense of self-compassion. So what are the benefits of self-compassion? Well, the benefits are actually more happiness, life satisfaction, confidence, and physical health. It's actually really very, very easy to get in touch with the reptilian brain. I mean, the truth of the matter is that it's very easy to get into that fight, flight, freeze response of self-criticism, which taps into the body's threat system. The amygdala gets activated with the release of cortisol and adrenaline, with that fight, flight, freeze. So when we feel inadequate, our self-image and self-concept is threatened. So we attack ourselves because we actually really view ourselves as the problem. I should have done that. I should have done this. I should have gone that way. I should have said this. This puts stress on not only mind, body, but as well as spirit. Our care system, which is the mammalian brain, which, with the release of oxytocin to do with the love hormone and endorphins, which are the feel-good opiates, when they're released, it reduces stress with increased feelings of safety and security. So when our care system is activated with soothing touch, gentle vocalizations, we downgrade the threat response. We no longer need to fight ourselves, which is that self-criticism. We no longer need to flee from others, which is isolating ourselves. And we no longer need to freeze, which is ruminate, right? The shoulda, shoulda, shoulda. The safer you feel, the more open and flexible in response is to your environment. So there's two veins in which it is that we have a tendency to go. One is to do with confronting and dealing with difficult emotions. We need the soothing, the warmth, and the tenderness. We need the validating and accepting what is. And the other is to do with the protecting and the saying no, providing what it is that we actually really need, and motivating to get going and to actually really do something, especially in regards to our self-care. Self-compassion is actually really caring for the experiencer. And mindfulness is to do with being accepting of the experience by listening to the sounds of your environment, your visual impressions, to do with touch and smell and taste, and all of those different sensational components. So now the question is, how do you care for the body, mind, and spirit, your emotions, your relationships? And there's 3 stages of progress. 1 is to strive to get it right, relief and greater enthusiasm for the practice of self-reflection. Number 2 is about the disillusionment, right? And actually really taking it on to do it for its own sake. Not just a technique, right? It's actually really to include it as what it is that you do as a life skill. It's a life practice. It's a practice for you as the self of the therapist. And then the next actual stage is that to do with the radical acceptance. Acceptance that we're not perfect, we make mistakes. That's when it is that our heart softens towards ourselves. And it also allows us to transform. It allows us to discover our core values, to be able to live in accord with them, to find our inner resources, to live more deeply and meaningfully, to learn from our challenges, our struggles, give to others without losing ourselves. And in order to be able to do that, we need to be able to stay in connection with ourselves in order to be able to help others. It's our empathic resonance, right? To be able to be aware of our own empathic distress. It's about paying attention to our own emotional discomfort by experiencing it with curiosity. In order to heal from challenging situations that can bring with them difficult emotions, we need to be able to cultivate self-compassion. The art of self-compassion, like the art of self-supervision, is to turn toward by labeling the emotions, being aware of the emotions in the body, exploring core beliefs, tolerating and allowing them by softening and soothing, and finally befriending our difficult emotions. Where you calm and soothe your mind and body, the person you are caring for will also feel that through the empathic resonance. We need to be able to identify our unmet needs, to begin to give ourselves what we have longed for, to be able to receive from others, to be our own source of support, love, respect, validation, and acceptance. This moves us into self-forgiveness. And actually, there's 5 steps to forgiveness. Number 1 is opening to the pain by being present to the distress of whatever it is that has happened. Number 2 is actually really the self-compassion, right? Holding ourselves by actually really softening towards ourselves. The third is actually really to do with wisdom, right? Paying attention to either the larger context of what it is that has happened or is around us in our self-portrait, or bringing the image in and actually really focusing on the particulars. Number 4 is actually really to have the intent for self-forgiveness, right? You actually really have to want to forgive yourself or forgive others. And number 5 is the responsibility to protect, actually really to learn from it, right? What is the learning is actually really the question, as it is that you're going through your supervision process of self-reflection. Of course, there is a negativity bias, right? We all work towards that negativity, right? And it's about embracing the good by noticing and appreciating positive aspects, by being mindfully aware of the experience of pleasure. So, and it's gaining in gratitude by recognizing, acknowledging, and actually really being grateful with self-appreciation, self-kindness, the, expressing and appreciating for your good qualities, right? Recognizing that common humanity, acknowledging our strengths, and actually really the mindfulness to pay attention to our good qualities and to see ourselves in a more balanced and holistic way. And the best practice for you is the one that is most meaningful or helpful to you and the one you are most committed to. And that's why I say in regards to, the art component of art and relationship, the art is actually really anything that you actually identify in regards to playfulness, using your imagination, your creativity, right, to actually really do the self-reflection process. No matter what it is that you do, the truth of the matter is that is your self-portrait. So here are the tips to be able to maintain practice. Make it as pleasant as possible so it is self-reinforcing. It's got to be something that actually really motivates you, that it's bold, beautiful, colorful. That's the only way in which we actually really add information to our primary information base. The next is that it really does need to be a short practice. Short practice makes a big difference. And that's why it is that whatever it is that you establish when you're going to be doing your own self-supervision, your self-reflection process, that it's not too big, right? It doesn't take up too much time. It can't be daunting. It's got to be quick, right? We're looking for the 5-minute process that gives you the opportunity to really connect in a quick manner. It needs to be something that you're doing in your daily life, right? So it's got to be a part of your repertoire. It's got to be something that you actually make room for. And whether or not you decide to do it, well, after every time in which you see a client for that 5 minutes in between, whether it is that you're going to be doing it at the end of the day, or as it is that for the doctoral process, we did it at the end of the work week or once a month or whatever it is that might be for you. It's got to be a part of your lifestyle, right? Your lifestyle as a therapist. And you need to be able to identify when it is that you need to do it the most. So when it is that there's something that's happening or you're experiencing or anything like that,
it's really important to be able to then get in touch with the process, because it's then when it is that you actually really need it the most. And the goal, really, at the end of the process is really to be able to get in touch with that self-compassion. And so when it is the self-compassion has a tendency to lapse, as everything it is that we do, even in regards to self-reflection process, when it is that it has a tendency to lapse, that's okay, right? Just start it up again, like any good diet. There's no right or wrong way. And I think that that's what's really, really important. It's not about the artistic ability. It's not about the creative ability. It's not about, trying to become phenomenal at something. That's not what it is that this is about. What it is that this is about is just a quick tool in order for you to be able to get in touch with yourself, to identify what's going on for yourself, and is there any changes that you need to be able to implement in order to be safe and effective in your use of self. Modern relational intersubjective theory actually really is a part of the psychodynamic perspective. So it's our experience that actually really is the driving force. It's our subjectivity, our moment-by-moment experiences. And that intersubjective experience informs, shapes, and guides what it is that we're actually really doing as therapists. So participating in a self-reflective process where it is that we're looking at ourselves actually really allows us to gain great insight into that intersubjective experience. It allows us to gain and maintain an awareness of the impact of the person of the therapist is having on the other. It provides the therapist with an emotion or experiential analog facilitating access to feeling, which provides the basis for responding in an attuned way. It allows us to take a good look into transference. And transference is the way the experience has been organized and meaning has been created. The self-object or developmental dimension to all therapeutic experience fulfills the self-object longings, unmet desires, and developmentally promoting growth and transformation. The supervisory experience itself is actually an intersubjective field of meaning making and making sense, and so is the self-supervision process as well. All experience is contextual. It facilitates learning of treatment practices. It's an in vivo experience of mutual influence between the self and the other of the artwork. And it allows for the making sense together as it is that you're taking a good look at yourself. It facilitates the unfolding of the illumination and transformation of subjectivity of the personal meanings that have been constructed. It allows for the attunement to and management of affect in the supervisory process, which are significant factors of developing professional identity. And it allows for a hermeneutic response. Looking at the virtue ethics model is about the idea that counselors are actually wanting to be virtuous and that emotion plays a key role in what it is that we do. This model allows us to examine ourselves through personal awareness. It also provides a social, cognitive, emotive process, a lens in which it is that we have the opportunity to look through. We also get to view our own competing values in what it is that we do and how it is that we're looking at the different situations in which we're coming in contact with. Next, we get to plan and take action based upon what it is that we see within our own self-reflection process of self-examination. Ethically, we have the responsibility to not only take care of our practice, our clients, our coworkers, but also ourselves. And it's really good to have a model to follow in order to be able to do just that. Taking the time to reflect based upon what it is that you're looking at when it is that you're looking at your own self-portraiture then gives you the opportunity to compare what it is that you're coming up with whatever the guidelines are from your regulatory body, and so that you have the opportunity to see if you're actually really in the right place.